Hey, this is David Kaplan from the Cap J Hood Show on ESPN 1000 and NBC Sports Chicago. Now get ready to listen and watch to Bulls 101 with Kris and Larro. Take that, Sparkles.
Welcome to Bulls 101 on this beautiful Saturday evening. I'm with my man, Mr. Larro Golden. We're well into the playoffs. Have some fun, some really fun former Bulls having some great performances, and then RIP to the Miami Heat. Got swept by the Bucks today. Jimmy Butler. How you doing? How you feeling?
Man, I'm good, man. Like you said, playoff basketball, and my boy D Rose has been the only lifeline on the Knicks offensively, it seems. So far,
balling. He's been balling.
Yeah, and I'd be messed up not to mention that his point of attack defense is just not there. But he's putting the ball in the hole though, so that's what matters though. So, but other than that, man, I'm good, man. I'm ready to talk some Bulls basketball, man, and chop it up.
That's what hurts, I think, the most is watching the play-in. First of all, watching the Pacers and the Hornets get just creamed in their matchup, and watching the Wizards and the Celtics just kind of get trashed by the Nets and the 76ers. I feel like the Bulls could have been right there. Could have been in those. They probably would have gotten smashed in 5 games or whatever as well, but would have been fun to see. But we can focus on the offseason. We have an incredible guest tonight, one of my absolute favorite Bulls writers. Stephen Noh used to write for The Athletic, Chicago. Still writes for his own Substack. You guys should definitely subscribe. I get an email. It's like those meme, it's like, wake up, honey, there's a new Steph Noh article. Like that's basically, you get an email saying you get the Substack coming on. So we're going to do a full mock off season between the three of us. So I wanted to welcome in Stephen Noh. Steph, how you doing, man?
Hey, how you guys doing? Thank you so much for having me.
Man,
we are excited.
Man. No doubt. I'm really excited, man. Just to chop it up with Steph, man. I can't wait. I can't wait.
It's Steph. You're a difficult man to get really, really excited, but we really want to get you hyped about this off season. So I know you wrote on your site in the last couple of weeks about kind of the off season primer for the Bulls and what the Bulls have available, the passes they can take in order to improve their roster this offseason. So wanted to see if you can kind of give us a Reader's Digest version of what the Bulls have to look forward to.
Well, I'm looking at your YouTube channel right now too, and I don't think Arturas has joined the chat just yet. So I don't know if you guys want to wait for him or we should just go forward. But maybe he'll catch it on the replay. But just to give you a short synopsis, I guess, like a 1-minute summary of the story I wrote is Bulls have basically 2 different options available to them in free agency. They can either, try to get some of these splashy free agents that you might have heard them linked to, or and in doing that, they would lose most, if not all, of their veteran players. They have a lot of veteran free agents. Or the other option is to keep all the vets. They could basically keep all of them and just make some moves around the fringes. I think people are, when they hear those 2 options, their immediate reaction is like, of course, let's go get the splashy free agent signings, like the $20-25 million signings. But the problem with that is that Arturas Karnisovas said this at the end of the year, is they're going to have a ton of roster spots. So if you go ahead and do that, then you really don't have very many avenues to fill in the remaining players, which, it doesn't necessarily sound like a problem until you start to actually look at the names on the roster and realize that, like, that most teams play at least 7 or 8 guys deep, and you're just going to have to sign at least a couple guys on the minimum to fill in those rotation minutes. So it's going to be a little bit problematic. Like, depending on who they could get, it might be worth doing that. But I think both options are valid. Like both have good pros and cons. So hopefully we get in some good discussion on what you guys think is the better option.
Absolutely. So I know with the cap space option, one of the things that we talked about before the Vooch trade was the ability to kind of max and extend LaVine's contract this offseason using cap space. Ryan Borja, we had on before the trade deadline, laid it out a little bit, basically cost somewhere around $14 million in cap space. So if they did do the cap space option, they could re-sign him or, max and extend him because his free agency, he'll be an unrestricted free agent at the end of next season otherwise, which is a little dicey given the situation with the Bulls missing the playoffs. But as you mentioned, it's kind of difficult to improve the roster at the same time if you're going to try and extend LaVine using cap space this offseason. But just wanted to mention that. I knew we talked about that before the show as well as another option that's available to us. But I don't know. I spent the last day and a half just going through and trying to do a mock offseason for myself, see what the Bulls could do. And there were some surprising things that I think I learned. The point guard market for free agency is a little bit dicey if you don't have cap space. And even if you do, there's a lot of competition for very, very few free agents. But I did find that the wing market, I thought, was a little bit more plentiful. And, there's a lot of kind of more low-cost options available there than I thought there would be. So some give and take. But, as you guys were going through this, was anything stand out to you as, surprising, or was it difficult to find the talent that you wanted to bring into the Bulls?
I'll go first on that one. So like I talked to Kris yesterday and I'm like, dude, this is different, because I'm just the guy, you cut on the tape. We could talk, offense, we could talk what their traits are, things like that. So learning the cap as well, like, at least trying to learn the cap as best as I can in order to put together a team that somebody can look at and be like, okay, I can see it, rather than a team they look at like, okay, this dude knows nothing. So, while I was doing it, like you said, the wing market was like huge, like you said. But one of the things is, again, man, it was just really tough, man, because there's a bunch of guys that you would like to have, but if you kind of have to like reel yourself back and put yourself in that front office and be like, okay, what's realistic about building a team that can still be competitive? So I'm right there with you in terms of the wing market, though. It was really nice, to check out a few of those names and see who we could actually get. So,
that's why I just decided to trade Zach LaVine for Tyler Hero and Goran Dragic. Call it a day. We're good to go. All right. See you guys next week.
Nah, bro, we can't do that. We can't do that.
Some of those, man, that Bleacher Report article was just, there's so many bad trades there, but it is really hard to play GM. So, Steph, I wanted to see what was your experience going through this before we get into what our actual offseason looks like. Any thoughts on that process?
Well, I started thinking about this stuff probably like a month or two into the end of the season, because it seemed like the Bulls probably were not going to do much in the playoffs, maybe not even make the play-in game, which ended up happening. And at the time, I wasn't, like, when I first started looking at sort of an offseason plan, I wasn't sure which direction they wanted to go. But as I looked at it more and more, and as I wrote this Substack article and started looking at the names, I was kind of surprised that pretty clear path emerged for me, where I think that, I think that they're probably going to follow this path, and it's probably significantly better than any other options they have going forward. And, we can get into that later. But I also kind of like briefly want to touch upon this LaVine thing, just getting out of the way, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah.
So that is another option where they clear like $14 million in cap space to renegotiate and extend LaVine's contract. And the benefit of that would be obviously that like he's not a flight risk then, right? Like you give him his money up front now and you keep him for be 5 years plus next year, I think, or maybe 4 years plus next year. I'm not exactly sure on that, but the con of that is that you can't really add talent around the team. And I think that that's just way too risk averse. And if you give him that same offer next year, I think that he's definitely going to take it. If you just look at the way superstars change teams nowadays, and Levine definitely is a superstar, like they get the money first. And if they don't like their situation, then they just ask for a trade down the road, right? So
Yeah.
I think Levine is going to sign a max or potentially a super max if he makes an all NBA team next year. I think the risk of losing him is very low. I mean, he says he likes Chicago. The team has gradually gotten better every year. And most importantly, yeah, they can just give him the most money. So it would just be like way too cautious to burn your very small wiggle room and resources that you have this summer to get better in order to just like get rid of, the tiny percentage chance that he decides to leave after he becomes unrestricted next year. I don't know if you guys agree or not, but that's kind of my take.
Yeah, definitely had that in mind as I was trying to look through my offseason mock, and a clear path emerged for me as well. So I ended up, because of the issues you just mentioned about Levine's extension, I decided not to extend Levine using cap space, and I decided not to renounce all of the free agents that we have, rights to if we kept. So I ended up going the over the cap space route with mine, and it sounded like, Steph, from the way you had said it, and I know from my discussions with Larro, it sounds like all three of us kind of took that same route. It just seemed like the easiest way to maximize the talent and not have to overpay in a free agent market where a lot of the teams do have cap space available. Like the Knicks and the Spurs, and there's some teams out there that can really just, because if we go the cap space route and Lonzo Ball gets signed day one, or Dennis Schroeder, Mike Conley, whoever the point guard we wanted just gets signed, now we're we're in a tough situation. So I think that, at least for me, the most intriguing part of this entire process was the possibility of a Lowry sign and trade. I think that presented the biggest challenge for me, finding a trade that could be feasible, and not only a team that would want him, but a team that would have an asset to give us in return that would make sense and would fit, within the rules. So I'm excited to get into it. If there's no volunteers, anyone want to volunteer to present their plan first?
Let's just get mine out the way, man. Let's just go ahead and get mine out the way. You can chop mine up and chew it up, spit it out all you want to.
I promise you it'll be better than Garbax's.
Oh my God.
I hope so, man, because if I'm below guard, man.
Bring back each one more, you already win. Bring back each one more on $8 million a year instead of Felicio, you've already won.
Well, man, like you said, man, I went the same route as you guys, basically above the cap, and I definitely did something different than you guys, but I think it's kind of cool because now we can kind of see both sides of it. I did think about doing a sign and trade with Lowry. I just feel like I feel like it's going to be hard to find a suitor for him because, I mean, just looking around at, like, a lot of people were saying the Spurs, but the Spurs have enough cap to just kind of like, they'll wait it out. And if they can sign him outright, they'll do it that way rather than the sign and trade. And I thought about the Kings and maybe like trying to get like a Harrison Barnes over here. But then I thought about it. I just don't. I think Harrison Barnes is not really a small forward anymore in my eyes. I feel like he's more of like a 4, and I feel like Patrick is that guy for us. So I didn't go that route. And after a while, I was just like, you know what? I don't think he is as valuable to teams as certain people feel. So I just kind of I just let him walk. And some people may hear that and be like, dude, what are you doing? Like that dude shoots 40% from 3, and my rebuttal will be is what else does he do? And I'm pretty sure every other team will think that way as well. So I just let him walk.
Well, to be clear, that is, I think, the most likely thing that happens is that we don't get a sign and trade with Lowry, that he probably will just walk unless the offers are so low that the front office feels like they can match and find value. But the problem is, if you're matching, you're matching the highest market value there is. I mean, by default. And so you really aren't getting value, at least at the time of the signing. You have to hope that player improves. He's 23. There is definitely a great possibility that he can improve. He definitely has a lot of things that he can improve in his game, as you said, Larro. I was saying Lowry. He's improved his shooting this year. He's got the size to do some things. We saw him get down to the post a few times, take advantage of mismatches, but I can probably count on one hand how many times that really happened and was effective. His defense, his rebounding, his assists, they all kind of were at career lows this year. So it's tough. I do think there's a market out there for him, but it's interesting that you let him walk in your plan. I think that's one of the most likely options. So I wanted to ask you, before you told us what the plan was, what were your goals? What did you think the team needed? What was your purpose in the offseason?
Well, before I finally made that decision, I really, like you said, that wing market stood out to me. And I said, you know what? I like Reggie. There were certain guys, okay? I don't want to release it yet, but people already probably know what it is since I said his first
Reggie
name.
Jackson.
Reggie. But they're just my number one thing was perimeter defense, point of attack. Because honestly, I'm just not I don't believe the offense is a problem. I just feel like a team that passes the ball as well as they do. You have two superstar. Well, we'll call Zach a superstar, and forget it. Vooch is up there close to it. So, but in terms of offensively, I believe those two guys carrying the load and hopefully the progression of Patrick, and then also with Kobe. I just feel like the offense isn't going to be a problem. So my biggest thing was, okay, who can I find that is like a fringe starter that can come in and add that wing point of attack and just kind of carry the defense with Pat. And I found that guy, and then also brought back some guys that we already had. And I just feel like that's the best way to go in my eyes, because I believe that team was good enough to make the playoffs if it wasn't for certain things, and like I said before on this pod is a lot of people will say, oh, well, every team dealt with COVID, and every team dealt with injuries, but this team wasn't good enough to have those problems happen to them. You can't lose a Zach LaVine and expect to still progress and try to make a playoff run, even with Vooch. I mean, there just wasn't enough of no matter how much you move the ball, you still need a guy down the stretch that can get you a basket. And that brings that 27.5 a game on historical, efficiency. So defense was my biggest thing, defense and wing. So.
Okay. All right. So what did you end up doing? Let's see it.
So Kobe is still going to be my starting point guard. I know everybody said that, we need a point guard. And my biggest thing is I just really respect the mindset of Kobe when he got benched. He came back and he played pretty well down the stretch, not only as a scorer, because there were some games where he wasn't putting the ball in the hole, and he was still kind of being effective out there, either, moving the ball, making the right reads. And I just want to see where that can go, and we always still have that $5.8 million contract, and I believe he's a tradable asset. So if he's not where, we can, where I think he can be, that's a possibility. I brought Satoransky back, Dotson back, Levine, obviously, Javonte Green. I brought him back because I do like I said, it's his defense that I love about Javonte. We need that here. We need that in Chicago. Point of attack and just some more toughness out there on the wings. Kent Bazemore was more of a guy, just kind of a vet men guy you bring in just to, the what do they say? The emergency guy, somebody you break the glass to get the extinguisher, fire extinguisher, and there he is. So I'm not too really worried about Kent, but I just wanted him here just in case, because he still can bring some good stuff. Reggie Bullock was my biggest my biggest, I loved Reggie Bullock. And if you're watching the playoffs, I don't know, maybe you see the same things as me, but I see a guy that can stretch the floor. He can defend. He's tough. I love that guy. You know, he's somebody that I think you can start at the 3, so you can move Pat to the 4 and let him excel in that. So, I mean, basically, and as you guys can see as well, Marko Simonovic is over here. I bring him over here and move forward with that. Now that I let, Lowry walk, I believe he's a guy that can come in and be close to that. Maybe not that high of efficiency coming in through the door, but I believe he's a guy that will be able to come in and shoot the rock and, with the play, if he gets playing time right through the door. But yeah, I just brought back a lot of the guys, and Tice is there. I brought him back, and that's just the way I see it. I would like to see it go. Bring back the guys, add some wing depth, and let's rock and roll.
Cool. What do you think, Steph? Like, how does this meet some of the goals that the Bulls might have on the offseason? Or if it doesn't, well, why not?
Well, I think the 2 most obvious areas that they have to improve on is point guard and wing, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, I've liked Reggie Bullock a lot this year. I think that you could definitely get him for the MLE, so I think he's going to make less than that. So yeah, allocating $9.5 million to get him, I think, is totally fine. Yeah, I mean, I think this team that Larro built, it's hard to make huge improvements to this Bulls roster, to be quite frank. And this is pretty close to the best that you're going to get, just in a 1-year improvement. So I think the Bulls won like around 40% of their games this year. If you put this roster together, I think that it's pretty feasible that they could get to a little bit above 500, which would be a pretty significant improvement. So yeah, I like it. I think it's pretty solid. It's not like the big spectacular splashy thing that fans are hoping for necessarily, but yeah, if you go through this exercise yourself, you're going to find that it's really, really challenging to do that.
Yeah, that's what I found about this. This seems the most realistic option to me. And I will say that the Vooch trade kind of changed the way the Bulls played, and I think, at least in my mind, lessened the dependence on a quote-unquote point guard, as lessened it for me versus the beginning of the season when it was clear that was a big point of need for the Bulls. But Zach and Vooch, I think, have improved enough in their passing abilities and playmaking, and Thad, playing out of the short roll has really helped. Kind of, the facilitation. They averaged one of the highest assists in the league after the trade. Their turnovers were down, so I think it's a recipe for success as far as a team that can make it into the playoffs with Kobe starting.
Yeah.
My major concern here now, Reggie Bullock definitely will help on the perimeter. He's a great shooter, a good decision maker. He's a quality point of attack defender. He's 30, so he's he's probably in his prime right now and kind of reaching the end of it. But I think the MLE or some portion of the MLE is a worthy contract, something that can be very, very movable as well if it doesn't end up working out. He's been kind of up and down, but his shooting's been pretty consistent across his career. I think he's a 30 to 39% 3-point shooter over his career. And yeah, I mean, bringing back Tice. So the Tice thing was a difficult choice for me because I love what he brought to the Bulls this year, the rim protection. My worry with him, number one, is you got teams like the Charlotte Hornets that really need a starting center. And he's already making $10 million, so I think it'll be difficult to retain him. You can retain him, but the other problem I see with Tice is the role that he's going to want. With Vooch, clearly the starting 5. With Patrick and Thad on the roster, Patrick's probably the future, and Thad has been really, really critical for the Bulls this year. For me, that was the squeeze that I kind of had to make the choice on, but I see what the roster put together where if you make the sacrifice a little bit at the point guard, you can bring him back and hopefully have that really solid front court rotation again that we had this year. So overall, I think realistic, we're probably losing Lowry for nothing. we're probably not going to be able to go out and get a big free agent point guard or in a trade. And you can bring a really quality wing like Reggie Bullock. There's a long list of wings, and we'll go through them that can be available for the Bulls in the offseason. So Larro, man, that's a solid job. That's I think, as Steph said, if you go through this yourself, you're probably going to find a very similar end up to your roster. So, well done. I'll go next. I'll save the best for last. So I'll go next.
Yes, sir.
My goals are very similar. I wanted the point of attack defense. I wanted better wing defense so that Pat could be moved to the 4 and be more of a interior defender, which I think has better tools for in general. He's I think a decent secondary rim protector. So those two spots, and then as I mentioned before, you could kind of tell from what I said, but I ended up not retaining Tice, and so I looked into the free agent market to find a backup. So I ended up there's actually a pretty decent amount of backup bigs. So Gorgie Jang is one that he played a little bit for the Grizzlies this year, and then I think he got waived, and then the Spurs signed him for the rest of the year. But he's a quality big that can shoot a little bit. That offers good rim protection. His stats have always been very solid. I know Bulls fans have been long upset that we didn't end up drafting him. I think it was over Tony Snell. So he was the cheap big that I brought in to kind of replace some of the Tice production, and then Patrick Williams moving to the power forward position. I retained Thad. I retained Satoransky. So I also did Reggie Bullock. I paid him a little bit less than Larro did, but still through the MLE. I also brought back Garrett Temple and Javonte Green, Devon Dotson, and picked up the options for Troy Brown and Kobe White. And I declined it for Arcidiacono. The big move here for me was the Lonzo Ball acquisition. So this one is, I was trying to see if something like this is really feasible, because I know fans have been clamoring for this trade. And it didn't happen at the deadline, but it was clear from Woj's reporting that the Bulls were really trying to get him on the team. And so I think there's a good chance that they've got, they're gonna search out that market and see if it's there. So I did a sign and trade with Lowry. Lowry was signing for somewhere between like $16 and $18 million a year over 4 years, which I think was still a pretty reasonable contract. And I think it's likely that he's going to get something in that realm. I don't know if you guys disagree with me on that, but that's kind of where I saw his market, somewhere between like 15 and 18 million, maybe up to 20.
Yeah.
But if we could, I know the Pelicans are hurting for cap space. They've got a Zion extension coming up. They're trying to make more time for guys like Kira Lewis, Cale Walker-Alexander in their roster. So I knew they didn't really want like a starting point guard or like even a Kobe White type back. And so what I did was I ate Eric Bledsoe's contract in the trade. So I traded Lauri Markkanen in a sign and trade with Al-Farouq Aminu and Tomas Satoransky for a total of about $38 million. The thing is, when you sign and trade that player, their salary only counts for half under the circumstance. But luckily, Lonzo Ball is also being signed and traded. I had him sign at $20 million. I think that's kind of where the people have said his market is going to be. And also took back Eric Bledsoe's contract as well. So Bledsoe comes in as our backup point guard, kind of takes the Satoransky role. Lonzo fills the need of a point of attack defender. He's not necessarily he's not a half court offense creator that we would ideally want, but he's young. He's probably the best guard on the market. He's improved every year. So yeah, that's kind of where I went. I don't know if you guys think that's somewhat realistic or not. I thought the Pelicans could use the shooting of Lowry and of Satoransky, and also Aminu's defense if he's healthy. I think he still has some left in him, but more or less, Satoransky and Aminu are expiring contracts that they could flip at the deadline and not be on the books next year like Eric Bledsoe will be. So I don't know. What do you guys think of what I did here?
So I like it. I hope that's realistic. I hope that's something that could happen because like
I think it's a
Eric
little bit
Bledsoe-
more pie in the sky. A little bit more.
Hey, you know, and the reason why like I like it is Lonzo, yeah, he comes in, he can play point guard, but he's, you know, you could play him at the 3. You can play him anywhere from 1 through 3. So that's nice to add some versatility. And if the Bulls want to continue with Zach kind of being a ball handler, you can put him on a wing and still do some things with that. And then you bring off Eric Bledsoe. If the Bulls are like, I don't know how you feel about this stuff, but for me, I don't know if Billy depended on the drop a lot just because there wasn't enough time to practice different schemes or anything like that. But if that's something they're going to do, Eric Bledsoe is pretty good, you know, getting over the screen type of guy, fighting over screens and rear view contests and things like that. With the Bucks, he was really good. Him and Brook were like really good together in that drop scheme. So I like that. Yeah, man. I like that team. I like it. I hope it happens. You know, hey, don't be as bland as me. You know, hey, let's try to go out and get something done. You know what I mean? That's nice, man. I like it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. I think that you're not giving yourself enough credit for how realistic it is. Like, I think the Pelicans would definitely do that trade that you suggested. They're desperately trying to get off Bledsoe. He was really bad for them last year, and he killed them. And he has 2 years left on his deal. As you said, they are in pretty rough cap situation. So if they can take on Aminu's money, which I don't think Aminu is a positive trade asset. I've seen some people saying that the Bulls can get something for him. I definitely don't think that's true, but the benefit for the Pelicans is they only have to pay Aminu for a year instead of Bledsoe for 2 years. So I think they'd be happy to do that. And Bledsoe actually could potentially help the Bulls just because, the Pelicans have a ton of guards. So it's not a good situation for him. And also, he's kind of washed, but he's better than Ryan Arcidiacono, right? So I think that he could help the Bulls a little bit, even though he'd be grossly overpaid. And then, of course, you get the benefit of Lonzo, which, you know, I was actually suggesting Lonzo like a year and a half ago to the Bulls. I thought that he would just be such a really nice piece alongside the talent that they had. And now it's kind of like, I'm like the hipster Lonzo Ball guy. Like now everybody knows about it, and you have to pay a way higher price. So I don't know if it's worth it at this point, but
it's the band.
It'll certainly be a better team than this year.
It's that band that you discover first, and then all of a sudden become popular. And like, I knew about them 5 years ago, guys. Come on, like this.
That's why I was on this podcast, so I could tell everyone that I was the guy that knew about the band first.
That was the first Lonzo Ball fan. Yeah. Well, that's the thing is that the realisticness of the trade for me was, Eric Bledsoe is a negative asset right now for the Pelicans. They really want to get off his contract. He was not good for them this year, but I do think he has some value for the Bulls as a backup. They could also play, as Larro mentioned, a 3-guard lineup with Lonzo at the 3 and Kobe and Zach alongside him. And you can play 5 out with Pat and Vooch on the floor. I mean, I just think there's some versatility there. And Lonzo is a very solid point of attack defender. And you got him, Reggie. If you had him, Reggie, and Pat in the starting lineup around Zach and Vooch, I think Zach and Vooch can hold up around that kind of team. And then, you know, they were 12th in defense with a pretty vanilla defense with a lot of, 5 new guys coming in mid-season. So I think with a full offseason, that could be I don't see why they couldn't get where the Hawks or the Knicks are this year in the standings. I think that would be a solid team. But the Bledsoe thing is hard. I guess the good part about it is he does have 2 years on the contract, but next year, so not the coming year, he's like 18.2 or whatever it was. But the following year, the second year of the contract, only $3.9 million is actually guaranteed. So if it really came down to it, we could get rid of it, have the 3.9 on the books, and be done with him. So if he really is washed, then fine. But I think taking on that contract would incentivize the Pelicans enough to take on Lowry's contract, which I think, if it's at $16 million, I think it's a tradable contract. There's a lot of teams that would talk themselves into Lowry's talents at age 23. I don't know, but what do you guys think about that?
I
know you're not a Lowry fan, but
see, that's the thing. Is I'm hoping Steph says something, because the people that watch this show more, they know that I'm not the biggest Lowry guy. But I think that's right. If it's anywhere from like 16 to 18, I think teams will definitely see some value with him in terms of being able to shoot. That's really about it. But I mean, that's a huge thing. So I agree.
Okay. Also, just to mention, both Larro and I's plans came over the cap, but under the luxury tax because we know Ryan Zorf's never going to pay it until we're like a deep contender, and even then, I have my doubts. But so we did go through, make sure this is all cap legal. Re-signing guys, renouncing rights, all the different stuff. So, all right, we'll get to Steph's plan. I know I saw a little teaser of it, so I'm excited. This is actually a route that I thought about very strongly. So I wanted to hear what you got on it.
So I have a secret plan that I didn't share with you guys beforehand.
Oh, no,
I have two plans. So a lot of what the Bulls do in free agency is going to depend on who actually wants to come here, right? Yeah. Like we can say that Reggie Bullock we're gonna bring him in for $6 million, but I mean, if somebody offers him 10, he's going to take that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good to have contingency plans and stuff like that. So my first plan, my 1A plan is they should start now and they should start tampering like hell. They should do all the tampering that is possible. And they should call Mike Conley's agent and Kyle Lowry's agent. Kyle Lowry's agent is Mark Bartelstein, which is like he has the deepest connections with the Bulls ever. The Bulls have gotten his clients a ton of money. He owes the Bulls like a ton of favors. So if Kyle Lowry is interested in the Bulls, they can definitely figure that out before free agency starts. And if either of those guys want to come to the Bulls, you have to make the moves to allow them to join, because they would just be the perfect fits for this team. I mean, they are kind of older. So Mike Conley is 33. He's going to be 33. And Lowry is going to be 35. But they're still very productive players. And you guys have talked about this free agency class and how nothing really wows you that much. And I definitely have that feeling as well. But these two guys are basically the only guys worth cutting all of your veterans for. So if that does happen, I think that reasonably you could, if they were interested, which it's pretty shaky that they would be, but you have to at least explore if they are. And if they are, I think you'd probably get them from somewhere around $25 million a year. So in order to do that, you would have to, first of all, you'd have to renounce all of your free agents. So that's Markkanen, Felicio, Tice, Valentine, Temple, Javonte Green, Makoka, Dotson.
Wait, you're not bringing back Valentine on a max?
I'm not bringing back Valentine, no. And then you'd have to waive and stretch Aminu. That gets his money off your books, but the reason why you're kind of hesitant to do that is that it's going to impact your spending for the next 3 years instead of just paying him for 1 year. And you also have to lose one of that or Sato. So you get to keep one of those guys, but if you keep that, then you have to also stretch Sato. So that's also going to impact your spending for the next 3 years. So basically, you get one of these like huge impact guys, which is super exciting. You're going to have to fill out the rest of the roster with kind of crappy players, and you're not going to be able to spend as much in the next couple years, which sucks because once you bring on like a Kyle Lowry or Mike Conley type, then your cap gets really tight and it gets very, very hard. It gets even harder to add any like decent players above the minimum. But again, like these guys are just, I mean, they're all-star level talents, and you can't add a player of that caliber through very many other avenues. So if you get a chance, you just have to, carpe diem, seize the day. So yeah, I'd be taking Bartelstein to the best steakhouse in Chicago, seeing if you can get Lowry in here. And given that, I mean, that's a long shot, that's probably not happening. Then we see the team that this is my backup option, the more realistic one. I actually didn't know that cap rule, Kris, that you were saying that sign and trades only count half outgoing. So I don't know if this is totally cap legal with Rubio's making $17 million. He's an expiring. I was going to sign and trade him for Lowry, who I think is going to make roughly $17 million. But if you only count half of Lowry's salary, we're getting way too into specifics. But you can just add Aminu there and add an asset or something, and that's going to get you there.
Yeah. It's the base year compensation rule. It's archaic and nonsense. So yeah,
okay.
It only worked for me because I did 2 sign and trades at the same time.
I'm not even that attached to Rubio. The point is that, yeah, you guys talked about Markkanen before. I don't think he has a ton of value, like in a sign and trade. I know people are very reticent to just let him walk for nothing because the Bulls have invested so much. But the fact is that that's kind of a sunk cost at this point. So you're not going to get a ton for him in a sign and trade. Like maybe you get Lonzo Ball. The only reason you would get Lonzo Ball is because the Pelicans don't want him, right? So like if a team, and these other teams like the Spurs, they can just sign Lowry outright. They don't need the Bulls to do a sign and trade. So the benefit that you would get from trading Lowry basically is you'd get a player that some other team does not want that makes like roughly, let's say like half of what his salary is, and you can add contracts on the Bulls side to even that out. So the reason why I picked Rubio is obviously the Timberwolves are not very good. He's a veteran, like he's not really doing much for that team, and also he didn't really play that well last year anyway. So he could help the Bulls. Hopefully he could play this like CP3 role in a very, very, very poor man's version. He did for the Suns. But the Bulls point guard play was just so weak that if you get a guy like Rubio who's mediocre, it would be a huge upgrade. It would help the team a lot. I am basically in my realistic plan. I'm bringing back all the vets. Bringing back Thad, Sato, Garrett Temple, Tice, Javonte Green, and Devon Dotson. I'm trying to get something for Markkanen in the side and trade. I'm just trying to get some veteran that another team does not want. And I'm letting Arch, Felicio, and Valentine. I'm buying them a one-way ticket to China and having them work from there. Let's see, what else am I doing? Oh, okay. So like the point of this plan, you also have $9.5 million in a mid-level exception to sign a free agent from another team. So there's a couple guys that I would target for this. Again, like you need to have multiple options here because you don't know who's going to accept this offer, right?
Right.
So Norman Powell is a player that I really like, but he just got traded.
He's gonna get paid. He might get paid more than that.
Oh, sorry. This is in my trade list. So Norman Powell's not on there. Okay. So Gary Trent Jr. is the other guy that Powell got traded for. Gary Trent Jr. is a restricted free agent. I think that it's pretty likely that he gets more than $9 million a year, but you can at least offer it and try.
Yep.
He's like
He'd be fun.
He's a good two-way player. He's like a little bit limited offensively, but he can guard and he's young, which is great. Taylor Horton Tucker is another guy who I think he's a clutch agent, so LeBron has really wanted to bring him back, but the Lakers are going to have a gigantic tax bill and they have a bunch of free agents. Yep. So another guy is Alex Caruso. So I don't think they're going to be able to keep both of those guys. So if THT ends up getting like a huge offer sheet, then maybe you can swoop in and grab Caruso. I know that he's one of these Joakim Noah types where you hate him if he's on the other team, but you love him if he's on your team. And he is kind of overrated because he plays with amazing talent, but he would just fit the team really well. I'll just run through these other guys really quickly. So Ariza is a free agent, Patty Mills, Ish Smith, and you guys already mentioned Reggie Bullock. I think all these guys, all the guys that I just mentioned, not THT and not Gary Trent Jr., those guys will probably get more than the MLE, but those other 5 guys you can get for under $9.5 million a year. So that would be a really nice rotation piece, fringe starter. That's about as well as you could hope for $10 million a year in the NBA or $9 million a year. And then Tice is like a really interesting piece. What I would do is I would just give. So according to my plan, as I've stated so far, they have about $9.5 million left before they hit the luxury tax. Whatever that amount is, up to the maximum, I would just give that to Tice for 1 year. And it's going to be way more than he's going to get anywhere else. And the reason for that is it's kind of like what the Heat did with Myers Leonard this year. I think they gave him like $10 million for 1 year or something like that. Mm-hmm. And everybody knew that Myers Leonard was not worth that much. But the reason they did that is because it's exactly what the Bulls would do in the situation. It was the maximum that they could give him it's really, once you get to capped out team, it's really, really difficult to add salary above that amount. So when you have a guy's bird, this might be too esoteric, but when you have a guy's bird rights, you can add just like as much as you want. So just paying Tice as much as possible allows you to add a ton of salary in ways that you cannot do otherwise. Mm-hmm. So Yeah, that just gives you a really valuable trade piece later that you can use to match salaries. And also the fact that you're overpaying him for 1 year, that gets him off your books. So all of the guys that I would bring back, this entire plan is revolved around it gives you a better team next year, but it also completely clears your books for the summer of 2022. And the reason why I would do that is, as I mentioned before, this free agent class really sucks. Like the Bulls just don't have very good avenues to improve the team if they're going to try to find a free agent, aside from Conley or Kyle Lowry. And even those guys, like they're not like amazing, right? Like they're not KD, who actually is a free agent in 2022.
Mm.
So if you sign a bunch of Bulls players, I know like Bulls fans don't want to hear about cap space plans because they've always failed. Like the Bulls have gotten room for 2 max players multiple times, and it seems like every 2 years they do this plan and it never materializes.
Bulls blogger is always on it.
Right. Because I mean, they're totally justified in thinking that plan sucks though, because in order for that plan to work, you need to be a team like the Nets, right? Like you need to show that you are close to winning.
Yeah.
And every time the Bulls have done this plan, like they did it after the Jordan years, and they were like a 10-win team. Nobody wants to join a 10-win team. Like
Exactly.
LeBron James is not joining a 10-win team. It's just not going to happen, right? So the way that you maximize your cap space and get like a true max free agent to come is you have to be a team on the rise, like the Nets, or this is my team right here, my second team,
Oh, no.
Atlanta Hawks.
Oh, no.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so like if you look at a team like the Hawks, they have a bunch of fun young players. People want to play with that team. Or like the Knicks, right? Like these 45-win teams that are just like on the rise. So the team that I've built is much better than last year's team. It's not an exciting team. Like I will definitely grant you that. And it's not a team that's going to make the Eastern Conference Finals. But the point of this team is most of these guys are going to be gone in 2 years, and they're going to be better, right? So they're going to get potentially to like 40 to 45 wins. They're going to show free agents that, hey, like this is a team that has a bunch of young talent. Like Zach LaVine is young. Hopefully Patrick Williams takes a leap. Kobe White is going to be on the team, and Vooch, and those are the only guys that are going to be signed past next year. So you're going to have $39 million in cap space. You're going to have a team that's like in the mid 40s in wins. Like that is the type of team where, you know, Kevin Durant looks at it and says like, hey, you know, why not? Why not join this team? And one of the free agents, this is actually not my idea. This is Doug Tonus's idea, who also has a great Bulls podcast, multiple Bulls podcasts, I think, at this point. But he's looked ahead and seen that Bradley Beal is going to be a free agent in 2022. Obviously, there's this Billy Donovan connection. It's a long shot for sure, but this is what you need to do. You need to build a path that has multiple avenues to succeed, right? So the path that I'm showing you guys, where you sign all the vets back for 1-year contracts, you can get top tier talent by managing a trade. Like this path, if you have 1-year expiring contracts of different values, it is really, really easy to make a trade for a higher salary player when it becomes available. And you never know when these trades are going to become available, right? Like nobody thought that Vucevic was going to hit the market. Nobody thought that, I mean, just like you can name any star, right? These guys just become disgruntled and then like teams have to find a suitor. So that's what the Bulls are doing. They're creating an avenue where if a superstar does demand a trade, well, now this is a team that's like pretty decent in the Eastern Conference, which is a weak conference, and you have the pieces to make a trade work. And also, if that path doesn't work, then all these guys are gone. You have $39 million to spend on James Harden, KD, Steph Curry, Chris Paul, Jimmy Butler, Kawhi, Bradley Beal. Like you're probably not getting any of those guys if you just look at them as an individual, but collectively, if you build all these different routes out, then like now you're actually giving yourself the best chance to add another third star to this group. And that just is what you have to do if you're the Bulls.
Right. I just like, for instance, with your eye, you know what I mean? Like if you don't follow Stephen Noh on Twitter, then you I don't know what you're doing. But like a lot of your breakdowns and stuff, I love. And you just said that they need to get a third star. Do you feel like AK and Mark are kind of operating as if they think Pat can be that third star, or do you think it's, they're just kind of trying to, you just let it, grow organically and still try to go and find a third star that may not be on the team?
Well, it's like what I said. I mean, it's really foolish to put all your eggs in one basket. So I think they're definitely keeping that avenue open that he develops that way, but they need to look at other paths. Like it's so, I think AK is like very pragmatic. He's not delusional. Like everybody knows that if the Bulls just continue on this path, like they're not really doing much, right? Like they need to add top end talent because that's just what wins in the NBA. Like you need at least 3 all-stars in order to be like a true championship contender. And the Bulls have 2. Yeah. Like I think Vooch is pretty borderline. Zach, actually, I think people are sleeping on because yeah, he's borderline, but he's getting better. So he actually could like break into that top 15 group, but Vooch is probably dropping. Like he's a fringe all-star now, and he's probably not going to be an all-star like 3 years from now. So you need to find some other way to get a top 20 player on this roster. And yeah, maybe Patrick Williams develops into that. But to count on that, I think would be a mistake, and I think that the Bulls also probably realize that. So they just need to explore every avenue possible, which is exactly what AK said at the end of the year.
Yeah. So I got a couple of small points I wanted to make about this exercise before we move on. But number one, and Vincent mentioned this, you may not have to, like if a team like the Spurs or the Knicks or whoever has a bunch of cap space and wants to sign Lowry to some massive contract that we know we're not going to match, and there's no sign and trade that makes sense, we can still do a sign and trade where we create a traded player exception for the amount that they sign, I think is what you were saying, Steph, that we can then use as salary to be able to bring in another player on the free agent market. So if he signs for $20 million and we do a sign and trade where we bring back the rights to some dude in Europe that's never going to come over and don't really bring in on a lot of salary, we can create a very large trade exception that we can use to bring in another quality player. So that may be an angle. I know, like even someone like Spencer Dinwiddie, or I have a list of point guards like Patty Mills, Devontae Graham, Derrick Rose. I know we were talking earlier. The point of attack defense is not Derrick Rose's strong point, but he would certainly be welcomed back into the city by fans, I would say. But so that's one point I wanted to make. And then let's see. There was a question on here that I wanted to do. Our pick this year. So we have a second round pick. It's going to be the 38th pick because we've got a swap with the Pelicans, who are picking 38th. We're picking 40th because of that coin flip they did last week. But the top 4 pick, if we get it, that's like anywhere from $7 to $10 million in salary. So that affects our long-term plans. But if we get pick number 1, pick number 2, pick number 3, and we get Suggs or Cade Cunningham, that would solve a lot of problems for us, because I think what's frustrated me about the rebuild in general is that there's been several elite to savant level creators that have been in these drafts that we have not gotten, right? Obviously Luka is one you think of, John Morant, even guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Fox.
We're one pick away from getting LaMelo.
Yep, we could have gotten LaMelo this year, and he's obviously a savant level passer. So that's what our team. That's what I feel. If we had one of those guys on our roster with a guy like Vooch and Zach next to him, I think the team's ceiling would be a whole lot higher than it is right now. And it's difficult to make. It's difficult to trade for a savant level creator. It's just difficult to do that. They're not available very often. James Harden was one of the few exceptions this year. And obviously you saw what it took to get him by Brooklyn. So, but I love what you said, Steph, about kind of keeping your options open. A guy like KD, who has said very nice things about the Bulls this year. And maybe if he wins the next 2 championships or whatever with Brooklyn and his contract's up, he may want to take his talents to, cold, bitter Chicago in the middle of the winter. That would be really lovely. But I think with all 3 of these plans, hopefully it shows you guys that what's really out there as far as the options. I do have a list that we'll go through a little bit later in the show about the people who are actually available, but that's the type of cap room that we have. If we go the non-cap space route, we have the mid-level exception for $9.5 million. And, we can re-sign some of the guys that we've got. And other than the sign and trade for Lowry, there's not a whole lot of other options available to improve the roster from, signing some of these free agents for big money.
So look, this is something so what I was thinking about was, this may be crazy, but let's say, okay, when does Kawhi have to say he wants out? Like he doesn't want to pick up his option. Like, is it August 1st?
I think so. I think it's before. I think it's definitely before free agency starts. He's got to pick up his option.
Because I'm wondering, like, does that change your, like, if you're AK, does that change your plans? And like, do you try to go for Kawhi, or are you just like, you know what, we don't have the assets right now, and you just kind of fall back and just fall to your plans? But like, what if?
I mean, you definitely go for him, but yeah,
he's not coming.
He's probably gonna, he's gonna want to join a team that's like higher up. So like the way I think about the cap is
I guess the reason why I asked that question is basically like, if in terms of cap, like what ways would you have to manipulate things in order to have a chance at a guy like that?
Yeah, you can definitely add Kawhi in if you really want. Like, yeah, the way I think about the cap is I bin things into different categories. So there's things that are just like very easy to do, like things that we've talked about. There's things that are hard to do, and there's things that are impossible. So I would say that clearing enough cap space for Kawhi would be hard to do, but not impossible. Like, if you really wanted to, you could trade Zach LaVine for nothing to a team with cap space, right? And then you just clear like 20 million in cap room. But you would never do that. You would never just like punt Zach LaVine, right? But like you could do that with any player on the roster. Like you could trade Kobe White into cap space. Like that's something that is kind of reasonable. If like you had a chance for Kawhi, like you just say buy Kobe, right? That's like 6 million. So you could just do that with like a bunch of different players. You could attach a draft pick to players to like clear off some contracts. So, I mean, whatever it takes. Like if Kawhi was willing to come here, like you would literally, do anything to the roster. So that's like a good problem to have for sure. And the Bulls could do it if Kawhi wanted to come, but like every team in the league is going to call him if he's available.
Yeah. It just, I'm a novice at this. So it's like, it's fascinating to think about like what you could do to create open space for him, so I don't know.
Well, someone in the comments mentioned that the Nets and the Lakers always seem to add, like they've added all sorts of talent this year. And it was crazy to me when I first started this exercise thinking, okay, we've got 2 all-stars that are on basically discount contracts. LaVine is $19.5 million. Nikola Vucevic is $24 million this year. Like those are great contracts for all-star level talent. And we don't have any bad contracts. Like the next highest contract is that at 14.5, which is still, I think, a pretty solid deal. And then you got Satoransky and Amino at 10 each, and Tice at 9.5. So it's like, how do we struggle with all this? But the reason, number one, that the Nets and the Lakers can do that kind of thing is because they are paying out the nose in the luxury tax. And so the luxury tax allows you to basically pay the people on your team as much as you want. And as you get higher and higher, your tax bill gets substantially larger. And I know small market teams love it because that money ends up funneling back to the different teams in some ways. And I'm not going to go into that right now, but so they can do that. Now the Ryan Reserves aren't going to do that for a non-championship team, but we can get up to the luxury tax. The only way that you can kind of screw yourself is with the hard cap, where if you do a sign and trade or you use some exceptions in certain ways, like you can trigger the hard cap, which the Bucks did this year, and basically you can only reach a certain amount, but otherwise you can just pay your own guys as the max. You could pay every single guy the max and just be deep into luxury tax if you really wanted to. So the Bulls are kind of limited, number one, because they don't have a lot of guys that they want to pay that kind of money to. And the Lakers and the Nets have the luxury of being able to get guys for a lot cheaper than market value because they're ring chasing. And we don't have that luxury. People are going to come here, are going to get paid probably market value or maybe a little bit above. The idea that AK and Mark are trying to bring to pass is to create the type of location that free agents would want to come to. No one wanted to come when Garpax was here. At least no great free agents. It was not a destination. So AK is trying to change that perception with all the different changes he's making. So hopefully it'll be, Chicago will be a destination for people that will help us financially. But the Lakers and the Nets, the Celtics, Miami Heat, the Warriors to some extent have markets and teams that, can get those guys for a little bit cheaper, and their owners are willing to pay luxury tax. So that helps a lot too. So I know this is like a lot of cap minutia that Larro and I and Steph had to go through. It's not always sexy and exciting, but that's kind of why they get those things.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Nets, so you can spend up to 136 billion next year before you have to pay tax payments. So the Nets this year are scheduled to pay 95 million in luxury tax payments. So they're basically paying like double what most teams are paying in terms of payroll, which is a lot, And also, if you don't pay the tax, like all those tax payments get divided equally among the non-tax paying teams. So I calculated it earlier. I think it was like $20 million or something that every team is getting by not paying the luxury tax, which obviously is a lot, So yeah, I don't fault the Rhinesters for not being willing to go into the tax for like a 45-win team. Now, if they start to get in the 50-win club and they actually start to become contenders, then they do need to go in the tax. And they've said that they will do that, but historically the Bulls have not been a tax-paying team, even when they were good. Like even under the Thibodeau years, they only were in the tax once, and it was like a tiny amount. It was like $5 million. I just said the Nets are going to pay $95 million in tax payments. So you can see the discrepancy there. But like now is not the time to beat up the Bulls for that, because it's just not reasonable for them to pay the tax now. So you're going to have to keep whatever players you want to add when you're putting on your GM hat, just add up all the salaries, and it has to be below 136 million. Otherwise it's just like not reasonable.
I didn't, it's funny you said that, because when Kris brought this idea to me, I was like, wait, what? Like you want to, at first I'm like, this is going to be fun. But then actually when you start going through the exercise and you started to break it down, you're just like, you know what, brother, this is why I didn't study accounting. I didn't do any of this stuff. This is why I think, what's his name? JJ Polk? Yeah. That he can just handle that side of stuff and put me in the scouting department or something. I don't have anything to do with this number stuff, man. So
it's a lot of nerd shit. I mean, undoubtedly.
But the guys that are really, really, really good at it, that have those jobs in front offices, they can get really creative and do a lot of fun stuff to help improve on the margins. So yeah, Larro's a coach, not a nerd, right? So
it's funny. It's funny you said that. Around the margins, like Steph, are you one as well that felt like AK and me didn't do a good job of like getting guys this past season that could help, with like a Mike James or something like that?
Oh yeah, I mean they did a terrible job, but they did a good job on other stuff. So I don't know like what grade I would give them overall. And I've heard the excuse too that maybe it was the Reinsdorfs that were handcuffing them, that didn't want to give them extra money or whatever. But that's not the way. I've heard that a lot, and that's actually not true. Like that's not the way the cap works. Like if they had signed somebody to a minimum deal, it's prorated. So I mean they're only signed for 2 weeks, so it's like a tiny amount of money. It's like $10,000 or $20,000 or something. And I just said like you're talking about a payroll. Last year I think the Bulls payroll was like maybe 100. 110, 120 million, something like that. So $20,000, like the Reinsdorfs are not going to stop AK from spending that amount of money to potentially like help the team a lot. So I don't know what the reason was for that. I don't know why they kept Cristiano Felicio on the roster when obviously like this is not an NBA player, or just a bunch of other guys. I mean, the Bulls were so hamstrung by not having anyone in like their bottom 5 roster spots they could play, especially in a year where, with this COVID stuff, like teams had to go even more than 15 deep. Like teams had to go 18 deep, 19 deep, 20 deep. And I think the reason the Bulls didn't make the play-in game was a lot of it had to do with them just like not focusing on the back end of the roster. So yeah, I don't think that was a Reinsdorf thing. I think that was an AK thing, and I don't know what the reason is. I'd be really curious what it is, but yeah, we just don't know.
I'm surprised they didn't ask it at the end of the season conference. But another thing, the another reason that the Reinsdorf being cheap kind of excuse doesn't make sense is, okay, it's a very small amount of money, but you're trying to get into the playoffs, and the playoffs make you a lot of money as a team. You're going to make that money back.
You make $1 million per home game. Like it's not quite that much because they're not at capacity right now, right? I don't know what the UC was, but let's say it's like half capacity, so it's like $500,000 per home game if you make the play. Like, so you've spent $20,000 on like a 10-day. Obviously, that's like a huge benefit, right? Like, there's no way Reinsdorf would ever say no to that.
Yeah, it's really puzzling to me why they didn't. But I mean, they could have used a guy like Austin Rivers over, Denzel Valentine,
right?
Or
I don't know,
or Jang, that's a weird one.
I got one
frustrating. Yeah, I just don't know.
I had a thought, right? So I mean, before COVID hit and everything, this free agency class was supposed to be not bad, right? It wasn't supposed to be as bad as it was, right? Do you think that was just guys saying, you know what, we don't know what's going to happen with COVID, so we're going to sign right now? And because I feel like Giannis, there was a lot of rumblings, like he didn't want to be there. He was, Golden State or somewhere else. Do you feel like COVID affected and made guys say, you know what, let me get my contract now. Let me get my money now, so I don't play with the COVID thing? Do you think that's something that made guys think?
COVID had a huge impact on all these free agent decisions because the way the cap is determined is you take all the money that the NBA makes and the players get a certain percentage of that money. I think it's like 51% or something, or 49% or something like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, the cap this year was $112 million. That's what every team had to spend. That was lower than what people were expecting, and next year's cap is lower too because the NBA didn't make as much money, right? Like they didn't sell tickets to a bunch of games, TV ratings were down, so there wasn't as much money available as we would have thought 2 or 3 years ago. So that's why guys were just like locking up their money because they if they were planning on being free agents next year, the money that they thought would be available to them just wasn't there anymore because just the league overall, just the pool of money available to players was much smaller than anyone could have possibly anticipated.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That was just something I thought about because I feel like, coming into the season, like my first thought was before the season started, I was like, you know what, if Zach and these guys show some promise, who knows, maybe somebody might want to come. But then after, once COVID happened, I felt the move. I felt why these guys, it's like, dude, let me get my money now. Who knows what's going to happen? So, yeah, I just thought, it just popped in my head. So I thought I maybe.
Yeah, no, that's correct. Yeah, you were right there.
All right, so we're gonna get to wrapping up here. I just wanted to go through a list of free agents that I think could make sense for the Bulls, specifically at point guard and at wing, small forward specifically. And I just want to give some hope, a little bit of hope, at least on the wing market, for the different options that the Bulls might have to use their MLE to do sign and trade. So the kind of the big free agent point guards are Lonzo Ball. He's 23 years old. Dennis Schroeder, 28. You mentioned, Steph, that the Lakers are going to try and bring back THT, Caruso, and Schroeder, and probably not going to be able to do all three. So Caruso would be a really, really good guy to take from them because he is, well, at least, according to some metrics, he was one of the best point of attack defenders in the NBA this year. As you said, he plays obviously with a great defensive team. So that's probably a little bit inflated, but he definitely is a good point of attack defender and someone who could help us on that end. He can also, make an open shot. He's one of those guys that plays hard. You love when you're on their team, when they're on your team, as you mentioned, Steph. So Derrick Rose, he's 32, but he's having a great season. He could be, a bench option for us. I hate even saying it because I just feel like it's never going to happen and that ship has sailed. But he's a free agent. Patty
Got to
Mills
bring back Ben Gordon and Heinrich too.
Larro's going to need a few minutes.
No, man, I get it. I mean, if you're being realistic, I mean, like, honestly, like, if you think about watching that Knicks game, like, as good as Derrick was scoring, he was giving up. He probably gave up like 20-some points in the first half just because he was just getting broken off on the point of attack, and Trey was able to get into the paint and find guys. So it's like, yes, Derrick adds that scoring punch, but you kind of wish he was just a bench guy that you, if you need scoring, you can come in and add that and not have to depend on him starting, going against another player, another team's star, so.
Yeah, Jeremy Lin could be a nice point guard, right?
Free Jeremy Lin. I think Rose is fine. I was just joking around, but I do get a little bit frustrated when I see a lot of Bulls fans only suggesting former Bulls to bring back. Like, you got to be a little bit more creative. There's like 450 players in the league.
Yeah.
I think Rose would be
only
okay,
know
though,
our own players. We only know our own players.
I hear people saying like, bring back David Nwaba, bring back Shaq Harrison. There's better options out there, guys. Like, those guys are not bad necessarily, but yeah, you should just look at the league as a whole, and you can find better options.
What about Etuan Moore? Come on, Etuan Moore.
I was a huge Etuan Moore guy. Like,
me too.
Yeah, he'd be okay, but
I love Etuan Moore.
I want to hear the rest of your list, Chris, because I know you have better options out there.
All right. So there's a couple of point guard options which I wasn't as excited about, which were Reggie Jackson, TJ McConnell, Cameron Payne, who's having a nice season, but obviously I don't think he would ever want to come back to Chicago.
Yeah, probably not.
Frank Ntilikina, he's only 23. He's got a lot of defensive upside. He's had struggles finding time in the next rotation, but he could be like a third option like Dotson. I know we had Dotson, I think, in all of our mocks, but he could kind of fill that role. So small forward, Kawhi Leonard, we talked about, obviously. Kelly Oubre, he's only 25. Will Barton, Justice Winslow. So Justice Winslow is one I almost put in there before I thought of Reggie Bullock, but I think Winslow is going to be I'm not sure that they're going to pick up their team option with him. 13, 13 and a half.
Yeah, he's going to be a free agent, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So if they don't pick up his option, he's going to be a free agent. I think he's a great buy low candidate. He's a very, very, very good perimeter defender, and he is just about as bad on the offensive end as he is good at defense, to put it lightly.
That's a good scouting report, yeah.
So, but he's 25. I don't know, like, he's a buy low option, so he could be, your second or third guy at the wing. Reggie Bullock, we talked about. Derek Jones Jr. is only 24. He's a pretty solid defender. He's a pogo stick athlete.
I think he has a player option though, so I think he's probably
he does. Yeah, it's about
he's
$9.
Free agent.
I think $9.8 million if I remember right.
Yeah, but if he doesn't take it, then he'd be a good choice. He'd
be nice. He can't shoot from anywhere else really. I mean, he's shooting like I want to say barely over 30% from three, but Devontae Graham's good. He has no rim pressure whatsoever. He's very, very poor finisher at the rim, Devontae Graham. But he's a good passer. He's a pretty good
shooter.
Yeah, he's above the break threes. He's very, very good. Good free throw shooter, low turnovers. So he's not a bad option, and he's 26. For the rest of the wing market, we've got Stanley Johnson, who's 25. Mo Harkless, 28. Torrey Craig, which the Suns got for nothing this year, kind of pissed me off a little bit, actually.
Hey, if Stanley Johnson can be the guy that played the last Bulls Toronto game, sign me up, brother. Hey, that brother looked like a superstar.
That's how the Bulls ended up with Luke Cornett, by the way. He had his two best games of his career against the Bulls, and for years the Bulls only signed guys who played well against them because I think that's like that was the extent of their scouting. So
I'm surprised we never signed JJ Barea because he was the ultimate Bulls killer. Every time we freaking played JJ Barea, destroyed us. Torrey Craig, as I said, he's only 30, but he could be a nice swing option. Nicholas Batum's free agent. George Niang on the Utah Jazz. He's 28. He's pretty decent as well. Ben McLemore, who's really come around after a really, really rough start to his career. He's still only 28. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson's 26. James Ennis, who shot 45% from the three-point land this year with the Magic. He's 31, but, so there's some options there. And then the center market's actually pretty good, too. You got guys like Cody Zeller, Nerlens Noel, Dwayne Dedman, Gorgie Jang, some more kind of like minimum backup guys. But there's a lot of cheap options out there, I think, that can really improve the 8 to 12 spots of our roster. It's just finding the starting caliber wing and the starting caliber point guard. I think that's going to, and especially the latter one, that's going to be our most difficult proposition. So I don't know. What do you guys think of that? That's a lot of guys, but I thought the wing list was pretty solid, actually.
Yeah, you can go first, Steph.
I think it's pretty telling that like the best attribute that you could give for a lot of those guys were their age. Yeah, I think the free agent class really sucks. Like the reason why I like my plan that I proposed is it gives the Bulls a lot of avenues to upgrade through the trade market rather than free agent market. I think there are a lot of candidates, buy low candidates, or guys who, I mean, you see it with like all the Bulls players, right? Like guys need the right fit to succeed in the NBA. A lot of times, especially, I mean, if you're a star, you're going to be good wherever. But for a lot of these role players, if you are not in the right situation, you're going to look like crap. And if you are in the right situation, you're going to be like, oh, like why? How did we get this guy for so cheap? So, these like guys that were drafted really high and just suck, and their only upside is maybe they'll be better, and they're still kind of young and they can improve. Yeah, that could work out, but I would rather just take a shot on. I have a couple names here of like guys that I would trade for. I mentioned Norman Powell before, but he's played well for his current team, so he might not be available. Monty Morris is a guy that the Bulls blogosphere has long craved, and you see Campazzo playing really well for the Nuggets, so maybe he becomes expendable. He has 3 years and $27 million left on his deal, so he would be so great on the Bulls. Like he's exactly what they need. DeAnthony Melton is actually the guy who would be my number one target in the trade market because he's on that same deal. He has about 3 years and $27 million left. And I don't think Taylor Jenkins likes him that much or something. Like something weird is going on with the Grizzlies. What was that, Larro?
He's not playing right now, right?
He's not playing at all, yeah. I mean, they signed him to this big extension. Like he's making a lot of money and he's just sitting on the bench. And he's good. Like he's a two-way player. He's a very, very good defender. The reason why he wasn't playing previously was because his offense isn't that good. But this year, like pretty much every flaw that you were pointing at his offense, like this guy doesn't shoot well enough. Like he shot great, and like he just doesn't score enough. Like he was a really good facilitator, good scorer, and just an awesome defender. Gives you enough size where you can play him on the wing. So like guys like that where they're buried on the current team, like Gafford was kind of like this with the Bulls. Like he just wasn't really playing that much, and like he did not have the right personnel around him to succeed on the Bulls. Like he was never going to succeed on the Bulls because they just don't have people that can throw those lob passes to him. Yeah. So those are the kind of players where I would target in the trade market, where whatever their coaches don't like them, or they have like the Grizzlies. The reason why Melton isn't playing is because they just have so many rotation players. They're like so deep, but they don't have top end talent. So
they have like 13 guys making $6 to $10 million, and like they're all rotation players.
Right. Like if 13 guys, there would be the 7th best player on the Bulls, basically.
Yeah.
So
it's true. It's really true.
Ask them who they don't want and then just take that guy, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I would love Melton. I mean, Gorgie Jang didn't play for them, and he was pretty good. Like he just didn't play for him.
He was terrible early in his career. I hated him. Like I thought he was so overrated. But he's actually become like pretty good. You're right. Like he was like the king of like just like this crappy old school game where he would shoot a bunch of long twos, and he's stretched out to the 3-point line, which I think has made him a lot more valuable.
Yep.
Still takes like forever to load up, but yeah, he'd be fine. Like he'd be a good and you would have to give up like nothing to get him, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a couple of the guys I wanted to mention that could be available now. Marcus Smart, probably not, but he would be a really nice option if the Celtics decided to ship him out for some reason. I know they're trying to get rid of Kemba, but that's gonna be a really hard contract to get rid of. I don't know what they're gonna do with that. DeLon Wright, he's only making $8.5 million.
Yeah, he was on my list too.
Yeah, he's kind of like he's a little bit more of like a herky-jerky kind of playmaker, but he's got good size, good defense. His 3-point shots really come around. He would be, he'd be a nice backup for the Bulls. Jalen Brunson has been pretty good for the Mavericks. He's a Chicago guy. Though. That would be a little tougher, but Mavericks, maybe they have a big offseason this. So we'll see. I think there's going to be contenders that are going to have roster crunches like the Lakers, or even some guys like in Miami, or there's going to be some changes to some of these contenders this year. And I think the Bulls can take advantage by swooping in on some of those guys like that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I don't know. Do you guys feel better or worse about free agency now that we've gone through the whole thing?
I mean, see, the reason why I took my route was yes, I know those players and I know what they bring, and I kind of feel like with a full kind of normal season, off season practices, player development thing like that, I think we could see some improvement. And if Zach stays healthy, I think we'll see improvement big time. But I just don't see a lot of guys that I don't think there's a lot of guys right now that I think it's growing. I think the outside view of the Bulls is getting better, but I don't think it's there yet. So
yeah,
I just thought this was the best idea in terms of bringing the guys back and running it back in a way, and maybe adding a. I know I gave Reggie Bullock the whole MLE, and I know you could probably break it up, give 2 guys it, 3 guys. But I just feel like Reggie Bullock, with this playoff performance he's been having, I feel like teams are going to be willing to pay him a little bit more. So I thought 9.5 would be like, hey, brother, here. Like, if they giving you 8, here you go. I don't know. But
he's going to have a market for sure.
Exactly. So
I think the years are important too. Like, I wouldn't mind giving him $9.5 million for 1 year. Like overpay him for 1 year, and then you keep the books open for 2022.
Yep.
But I wouldn't give him like $9.5 million for 4 years, because that's just gonna impact your future too much.
Yeah. There's one wing I did not talk about as a free agent, but his name is Otto Porter Jr.
I was actually thinking that Otto would be a decent bring back guy. I mean, I think some team is actually going to pay him. But if you can get him for like, I don't know, under the MLE, he actually fits a lot of what the team needs.
That was my biggest disappointment this year, because when Otto played well, this team hummed. He fits so well with the team in his skill set, and it's just so embarrassing that it sucks that he just wasn't healthy all year.
He's going to get paid. Some team is going to pay him, so it's a moot point anyway.
He's just got to prove that he can be, he can stay healthy, I think. So
getting healthy, I mean, getting in great shape. I just feel like he just hasn't been in the best shape, and that I think part because he's been rehabbing and maybe
circle is a shape. I will point that
out. Too much Kirkland signature wine is going on in that body. I wish him the best, though. I liked him a lot. I thought he was a great player. I even at the beginning of the season I said if you think he's healthy, you should extend him before the free agent class comes out, because he'll get paid this offseason if he's healthy. Obviously, it didn't happen, but that's a big disappointment. So he was supposed to be, Vincent's right. He was supposed to be a huge piece of the Bulls. I was very high on him coming into the year because he was an elite shooter with Washington Wizards and when he first got here. So sometimes things just don't work out, and that's the way it goes. But I think, and Anyways, I asked you guys a question that you didn't really answer, but that's fine. I feel more encouraged. I feel more encouraged after this exercise that things are available. And Steph, you kind of brought it home there with, hey, even if it doesn't happen this year, we're putting ourselves in a position to open up multiple options for the future. And if we can be that up and coming sexy team this year and have a lot of tradable contracts, AK can make stuff happen. We've seen him go after stuff. Yeah, the Hawks. I mean, the Hawks did it. They had a whole crapload of cap space, not like we did, and they certainly signed a whole bunch of dudes. Chris Dunn, I don't think has still played for them at all.
I like Trae Young. Being able to watch him more often, like you see him every now and then on TV, but like being able to watch him, like that dude is a pick and roll, double drag. Dude,
his floater's on point.
That pass,
I don't enjoy watching him. He's very, very good. I don't like him.
that pass to Bogey,
okay,
he came off the screen, hit Bogdan, just no look, right in the shooting pocket. It was, dude is unreal, man. Like, yeah, he's not good defensively, whatever, but dude,
he can play. The man can play. So, yeah, Dunn got a couple games. I think he hasn't played in the playoffs, but yeah, Bogdan's play, he's been fantastic. He would have been really, really good on Milwaukee too. That was a bummer that got blown up.
He would have been great on the Bulls.
Well, missed opportunities. Well, Steph, we really appreciate you coming out tonight, and I hope you guys had fun. This was fun exercise for me. I learned a lot more about how the CPA works. I know Larro did too. So that was fun.
What is it? The continued learning credits or whatever you need for the bar.
I wish, man. I don't think so. I'm gonna check because I spent several hours on this over yesterday and today just to make sure I had everything lined up the way it should. So, but anyways, I'm gonna put a poll on Twitter with our 3 plans and see who thinks number one, who's do you like the best. And then whose do you think is most realistic? So we'll put those out probably tomorrow when I'm awake again, and we'll see what happens. But Steph, so great to have you on for the first time. We hope you'll come back another time. You've been one of my inspirations, honestly, to get more into talking about the Bulls based on your work and all that you've done. And you've always had really kind words to say towards to me as well and encourage me. So let people know where they can find your work, because I will say, if there's one person I could recommend, if you're a Bulls fan, if there's one person whose work you really, really need to read out of anybody, it's Stephen Noh. So, Steph, where can they find your work and where can they follow you?
I see it's scrolling if you watch this on YouTube, which you should, because you can see all of our funny facial reactions when people have terrible ideas. But for those listening in podcast form, which is how I usually digest the show, I have a Substack. It's Steph Noh, STEPHNOH.substack.com. That's also my Twitter, Steph Noh. I'm not writing like a ton these days, but free agency is really interesting to me, so I'll definitely have some more. I'm probably actually going to write something based on our conversation today of just like names, that I think the Bulls should go after. So
yes, we've inspired something.
Totally free. Just sign up for the mailing list, and you'll get a little alert that apparently makes Chris's day.
Babe, wake up! There's the new Steph Noh article.
Yeah.
I gotta make the meme now. I gotta make it.
Let's do it.
Man, you know what? I gotta ask you a question before we get out of here, Steph. If you could have one,
I would ask for more wishes.
What would be if I'm trying to figure out this question here. So, what would be the number one food you would pick to drink with that wine you had tonight? This
is Costco box wine. Very good.
Otto Porter approves.
Yeah. I got it from my sommelier, Otto Porter. And what would I eat with it? I don't know. I guess like a good steak and wine, right? That's the combo.
Okay.
Are you more of a filet mignon or a ribeye?
I get the cheap cuts. I like the skirt steak, to tell you the truth.
Sounds like me.
Yeah. Get some
Ain't
steak
going
and
to-
eggs.
Man.
Sound like a father.
Anything from Costco, whatever's on sale at Costco.
Yep.
that's fine.
Exactly.
Costco's my go-to.
Yeah.
Shout out
Oh,
Costco.
man.
Shout out Costco.
You got great orange juice, Costco. Appreciate you guys. All right. We're going to take off for the night. Thank you guys so much for the comments, the questions. Hope you guys enjoyed, and make sure to look out for our poll. Please vote for me. All right. See you guys later. Peace.